A manager's hand connects with a young woman's face, a sharp crack in the gilded silence, utterly unaware that her father is the Titan. Darius King, how will this saga unfold? Connect with our channel, propel this story forward, and declare in the comments where you are joining us from. The gentle murmur of Viridia's perpetual traffic was a distant whisper as Kaylin King emerged from her vehicle, sliding her sunglasses into place against the brilliant, almost blinding sun. She had chosen a spot, a brief stroll from the city's most exclusive shopping promenade, carving out a quiet moment to gather her thoughts before plunging into a world that both fascinated and repelled her with its shimmering opulence. Ahead, the boutique stood like a temple to modern extravagance, a glass-fronted jewel box named Elysian, its name shimmering in ethereal gold script upon the immaculate facade. The window display was a silent opera of fashion, mannequins frozen in elegant poses, swathed in gowns that spoke of immense wealth and untouchable prestige. Kaylin took a deep, centering breath. She was here for a reason, a clear purpose. But entering places like this always felt like a precarious performance on a high wire. Her mission today was deceptively simple: to discover the one perfect gown for her academy's upcoming winter gala. It was more than a dance. It was her first real opportunity to be seen as something other than the daughter of Darius King. While she carried her renowned father's name, Kaylin was fiercely determined to carve out her own identity, to be recognized for her own spirit. She yearned to feel radiant, powerful, and completely, authentically herself on that night. As she glided through the boutique's heavy glass door, a soft, crystalline chime announced her presence. The interior was a study in minimalist grandeur. Pristine white marble floors reflected the soft, ambient glow of hidden lighting, and polished chrome racks displayed garments that felt more like works of art than mere clothing. Kaylin found herself pausing, just for a beat, to absorb the atmosphere. A subtle, expensive fragrance lingered in the air, a delicate blend of rare florals and bright citrus, mingling with the almost subliminal hum of a classical melody. Yet, beneath the luxurious surface, a familiar disquiet began to stir within her. The few employees positioned around the space cast cool, appraising glances in her direction. Her attire, a comfortable yet chic tracksuit and pristine sneakers, was perfect for her morning's activities, but was a stark contrast to the couture uniformity of the other clientele. She tightened her ponytail, dismissing their initial assessments and refocusing on her goal. Presiding over the counter was a woman who seemed sculpted from ice and ambition. Tall, flawlessly attired in a sharp black blazer and a form-fitting skirt, her platinum hair cut into a severe, angular bob. Her name tag identified her as Seraphina Croft, and her expression was as polished and unyielding as the marble floor. Kaylin offered a warm, genuine smile, but Seraphina responded only with a perfectly arched eyebrow before her gaze dropped back to the tablet in her hands. Unfazed by the frosty reception, Kaylin navigated toward a collection of evening wear. The gowns were breathtaking, cascades of soft silk and shimmering satin in a kaleidoscope of hues. Her fingers drifted, barely touching the fabric of a deep indigo dress that seemed to capture the very essence of a moonlit sea. It was the one. She could already feel it, envisioning the way it would move with her, a liquid shadow as she walked. "Excuse me," she began, turning back toward Seraphina. "Could I possibly try this on?" Seraphina's eyes remained fixed on her screen. "Are you quite certain you're in the right establishment?" she inquired, her voice a silken thread laced with undisguised condescension. Kaylin felt a jolt as if the air had suddenly chilled. She was certain she must have misheard. The question hung between them, a sharp, invisible barb. She scanned the immediate area, expecting Seraphina to be addressing someone else, but they were alone. "I'm quite certain I am," Kaylin replied, her voice remarkably steady. "I would like to try on this dress." At last, Seraphina looked up, her gaze narrowing as it traveled slowly from Kaylin's sneakers to her face, a deliberate, demeaning inventory designed to unsettle. "That particular gown," Seraphina stated, her voice low and dripping with sarcasm, "is a part of our signature collection. It isn't something we generally allow just anyone to handle. A spark of indignation ignited in Kaylin's chest. "I am a customer," she asserted, her tone firm. "I don't understand why I can't try it on." Seraphina's lips twisted into a small, insincere smile. "Oh, of course you're a customer," she purred, the word itself a mockery. "But we do have protocols in place to protect our more delicate creations. Perhaps I could show you something a little more appropriate." The implication was a sharp slap of its own. Kaylin was no stranger to being prejudged. Being the child of a global icon meant constantly navigating a minefield of assumptions. But this felt different. This wasn't about her name. This was about her, standing right here, in this moment, being told she was unworthy because of her appearance. Kaylin drew a slow, deliberate breath, forcing the heat of her anger back down. "I would like," she repeated, her gaze unwavering, "to try on this dress." Seraphina's smile evaporated. She stepped out from behind the counter, the sharp click of her heels on the marble floor sounding like tiny, aggressive cracks of a whip. Her approach was measured, almost predatory, and her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Girls like you," she hissed, the words slicing through the serene ambient, "don't belong in a place like this." For a moment, Kaylin was utterly speechless, the venom in the words slowly seeping in. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, the anger simmering just below the surface. But before she could form a reply, Seraphina stepped back, her composure perfectly restored. "Do let me know if you require any further assistance," Seraphina said, with an air of absolute finality, pivoting on her heel and walking away. Kaylin stood rooted to the spot, her thoughts a chaotic whirlwind. The weight of the exchange was crushing, but she would not allow it to shatter her. She was not leaving without that dress, or at the very least, without ensuring her voice was heard. As the pristine elegance of Elysian surrounded her, a fire kindled in her chest. This was about so much more than a dress now. This was about standing her ground and refusing, absolutely refusing, to be made to feel small. The fire in Kaylin's chest blazed with intensity as she remained in the heart of the boutique, the midnight blue gown clutched in her hand. The gentle strains of classical music now seemed to taunt her, as though the tranquil atmosphere could somehow nullify the sting of Seraphina's venom. She could feel the judgmental stares of the staff upon her, their silent scrutiny of fuel for her growing resolve. She was not backing down. Kaylin strode toward the fitting rooms, the dress a silken banner over her arm. Her sneakers made a faint squeaking sound against the polished marble, a note of defiance in the store's hushed opulence. Seraphina's sharp voice sliced through the air from behind. "Miss, I must insist you stop this instant." Kaylin turned with deliberate slowness, her eyes locking with Seraphina's cold glare. The manager stood by the counter, arms folded across her chest, an expression of profound irritation carved onto her features. "Pardon me?" Kaylin inquired, her tone perfectly level. Seraphina's lips compressed into a razor-thin line. "That gown is from our premium collection. We do not permit," she paused, her eyes narrowing, as if searching for the most cutting word, "everyone to handle these pieces. Perhaps you would be more comfortable looking at something more accessible." The pointed emphasis on accessible was a dagger aimed directly at Kaylin's dignity. Her fingers tightened on the soft fabric. "I'm not just handling it. I intend to try it on," she stated with unwavering firmness. Seraphina's gaze darted to the gown and then back to Kaylin, her condescension thick enough to taste. "And how precisely do you plan to afford such an item?" she queried, her voice a low, insulting blade. Kaylin felt her jaw clench. "That is entirely my business." Seraphina took a menacing step forward, her heels clicking like a metronome of impending conflict. "It becomes my business when an individual enters this establishment and begins touching items far beyond their means," she declared, her voice sinking to a near whisper. "I recognize the pattern. People like you—" Kaylin's heart hammered against her ribs. She could feel a hot flush of anger and disbelief creep up her neck. "People like me?" She wanted to hurl the words back, to demand an immediate explanation, but she mastered the impulse. Instead, she held Seraphina's gaze, refusing to be the first to look away. "I am not leaving," Kaylin stated, her voice a bastion of calm in the storm raging inside her. "I'm going to try on this dress." Seraphina's eyes flashed with fury, but she held her ground, straightening her posture as if bracing for combat. "If you do not return that gown to the rack and exit the premises, I will summon security," she announced, her voice cold and absolute. The threat hung in the air, dense and suffocating. Kaylin could hear her own pulse drumming in her ears, a sound that nearly drowned out the soft classical music. She glanced around the boutique, her eyes meeting the cautious gazes of other shoppers. Some quickly averted their eyes, feigning interest in the merchandise, while others watched with a blend of curiosity and unease. A woman near a display of handbags looked as if she might speak up, but a quick glance at Seraphina made her hesitate and turn away. No one was going to help. She was alone in this. "No," Kaylin said, her voice ringing out, loud enough to capture the attention of everyone in the store. "You will not be calling security. I am a customer, and I possess every right to try on this dress." For a fleeting second, Seraphina's composure fractured, her eyes widening in surprise before narrowing once more. "You are creating a disturbance," she hissed through clenched teeth. "I am asking you politely to depart before the situation escalates." Kaylin's hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a surge of pure adrenaline. She would not be intimidated by this woman, not today. "You are the one causing this to escalate," Kaylin retorted. "My only action was selecting a dress. You are the one who is making baseless assumptions about me, and frankly, I am done tolerating it." Seraphina advanced another step, her expression darkening. For a moment, Kaylin thought she might concede, but then Seraphina's hand shot out, seizing the gown from Kaylin's arm. "Give that to me," Seraphina snapped, tugging sharply. Kaylin clung to the dress, refusing to surrender it. "What is your problem?" she demanded, her voice rising. "You can't just snatch things from a customer's hands." "I can and I will when I'm protecting store property," Seraphina shot back, her grip tightening as she pulled with more force. The dress slipped from Kaylin's grasp, the delicate material bunching in Seraphina's fist. Kaylin reached instinctively to retrieve it, but before she could make contact, Seraphina's other hand lashed out, striking her across the cheek with a sharp, stinging slap. The sound echoed through the now silent boutique. Kaylin stumbled back, her own hand flying to her face. For a disbelieving moment, she couldn't register what had just occurred. Her cheek burned, a dual fire of physical impact and searing humiliation. Seraphina froze, her eyes wide with a flicker of shock, as if even she couldn't believe her own actions. An unnerving silence descended upon the store, punctuated only by the faint, indifferent melody still playing from the speakers. Kaylin's mind raced. Tears threatened to spill, but she fought them back, refusing to give Seraphina the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Instead, she drew a deep, ragged breath, her fingers curling into tight fists at her sides. "You just hit me," Kaylin said, her voice trembling with a potent mix of shock and rage. Seraphina opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. She seemed paralyzed, her hand still clenching the dress as if it were a shield. "You just hit me," Kaylin repeated, her voice louder now, cracking with emotion she no longer cared to hide. She wanted every single person in that store to hear. "Do you actually believe you can treat people this way and face no consequences?" The other customers stared, their faces a gallery of shock and discomfort. No one moved. No one spoke. Kaylin felt their eyes on her, but not one of them came forward. Seraphina finally seemed to rally, pulling herself erect, her face hardening into a mask of cold detachment. "I am going to have to ask you to leave, right?" she stated, her voice tight and controlled. "You are no longer welcome in this store." Kaylin's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she would not let them fall. She took another steadying breath, forcing her shoulders back. She would not let this woman see her break. "Fine," Kaylin said, her voice low but resolute, "but this is not over." She spun on her heel and walked toward the entrance, the soft squeak of her sneakers against the marble, a final small act of defiance. As she reached the door, she cast one last look over her shoulder. Seraphina was still standing in the center of the boutique, clutching the midnight blue gown. The store's opulent interior seemed to shrink around her as Kaylin pushed the door open, stepping out into the bright, unforgiving sun. The cool air was a balm on her stinging cheek, but did nothing to quell the tempest inside her. Her mind was already spinning, calculating her next move. She would not let this pass. Seraphina Croft may believe she could get away with such treatment, but Kaylin was about to prove her profoundly wrong. This was no longer about a dress. This was about standing up for herself and for every other person who had ever been made to feel insignificant. The boutique door closed behind Kaylin with a heavy finality, the faint chime of its bell lost in the roar of her thoughts. She stood on the sidewalk, hands shaking as adrenaline surged through her veins. Her cheek still throbbed from Seraphina's slap, but it was the deeper wound, the humiliation, the raw anger, that burned with a far greater intensity. The warm, relentless Viridia sun beat down on her as she retrieved her phone from her pocket. Her own reflection stared back from the dark screen, wide, fiery eyes, and the faint crimson mark blossoming across her cheek. For a heartbeat she paused, her thumb hovering over the camera icon. To share what just happened felt terrifyingly vulnerable, an act that would expose her to the judgment of millions. But then she pictured Seraphina's smug expression, her voice dripping with disdain. People like you. No. She would not let this moment be erased by silence. She tapped the camera app and switched it to record, her voice emerging steady, though she could feel the tremor just beneath the surface. "My name is Kaylin King," she began, holding the phone out to capture both her face and the elegant facade of Elysian behind her. "This is what happens when you walk into a store and someone decides you don't belong. Today, a woman inside this boutique didn't just insult me, she hit me." She allowed the words to hang in the air for a moment, her cheek pulsing as if to punctuate the statement. "People need to see this," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "because this isn't just about me. This happens every single day to people who don't have a platform, who don't have a voice. And it is time we start holding people accountable." She stopped the recording and, without a second thought, uploaded it to her social media platforms. The caption was simple but potent. "This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's ever been made to feel less than. Rise up together and speak your truth." As she pressed post, a small part of her braced for the inevitable backlash. Having grown up in the public eye, scrutinized for every move due to her father's celebrity, she was prepared. But this wasn't about him. This was about her, and about an issue far larger than any one person. The notifications began to ping almost instantly, a cascade of comments and shares arriving faster than she could read them. Her followers, millions strong due to her father's legacy and her own rising profile, were incandescent with rage. Messages of solidarity flooded in, but so did the trolls. She had anticipated that. The internet was a predictable beast. Still holding her phone, she began to walk, her sneakers striking the pavement with a new sense of purpose. She replayed the encounter in her mind, every insult, every cold stare, every calculated attempt by Seraphina to diminish her, each memory a fresh log on the fire of her anger. She was not going to let this go. Hours later, Kaylin sat cross-legged on her bed, the room dark save for the glow of her phone screen. The video had exploded. Millions of views, hundreds of thousands of comments. Major public figures were reposting it, lending their voices to the swelling chorus of indignation. Activists, celebrities, and total strangers were sharing their own stories of discrimination, transforming her singular post into a powerful rallying cry. A notification caught her eye, a direct message from Zara, one of her closest friends. "OMG, Kaylin. I just saw your video. Are you okay?" "What happened?" Kaylin paused before replying. How could she even begin to explain something like that? She didn't want to sound weak, but she refused to downplay it. Finally, she typed, "I'm okay now." "But it was awful, Zara. She actually slapped me." Literally. The response was immediate. "What? That's insane. You have to do something." "Like legal action or something?" Kaylin stared at the message, the idea taking root. Legal action. Could she? Should she? Her gut instinct was to fight, but the thought of lawsuits, media frenzies, and endless questioning made her stomach clench. She wasn't afraid of a confrontation, but this felt monumental, bigger than her. And yet, wasn't that the entire point? This was about setting a precedent, about fighting for everyone who couldn't. Her phone buzzed again, a call from her father. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. She knew what he would want, to protect her, to shield her. But Kaylin didn't want protection. She wanted justice. She answered, "Hey, Dad." Darius King's deep, familiar voice filled the line. "Kaylin, I just saw your video. Are you okay? What happened? Talk to me." She took a deep breath and began to recount the entire day, starting from the moment she walked into Elysian. Her voice only faltered once, when she described the slap, the shock of it still raw in her memory. A long, heavy silence stretched across the line before her father spoke again, his voice tight with barely suppressed fury. "She hit you?" he asked, the words laden with disbelief. "She put her hands on you?" "Yes," Kaylin said quietly. "I'm on my way," he stated, his tone leaving no room for debate. "We are not letting this go." When Darius arrived at Kaylin's apartment later that evening, his towering frame seemed to fill the entire doorway. Despite his larger-than-life persona, his first action was to pull Kaylin into a powerful hug, holding her as if he could shield her from the entire world. "I'm proud of you," he said softly, "for standing up for yourself. But we're taking this further. They are not getting away with this." Kaylin nodded, her own resolve solidifying in his presence. Together they began to strategize. Darius made calls to his legal team while Kaylin reached out to activists and influencers who had offered their support online. Their next move, they decided, was to investigate the boutique's history. If Seraphina had treated her this way, it was almost certain she had done it to others. In the following days, the momentum surged. News outlets seized the story, and more people came forward with their own negative experiences at the boutique. A former employee, speaking anonymously, confirmed that Seraphina had a long-standing pattern of discriminatory behavior, offering chilling stories that mirrored Kaylin's own. Kaylin remained a constant presence on social media, providing updates and amplifying the voices of others. She refused to let the narrative stray from the larger issue of systemic prejudice. This was not just about her. It was about a culture that enabled people like Seraphina to act without consequence. The turning point arrived when Elysian's corporate office issued a public statement. They apologized for the unfortunate incident, announced that Seraphina had been suspended pending an investigation, and promised to implement diversity training for all staff. But for Kaylin it was not nearly enough. Words were cheap. Action was what mattered. As she sat at her desk late one night, drafting another post, she felt a powerful surge of determination. This was not over. It couldn't be. She was only just getting started. The next morning, Kaylin woke to the incessant buzz of her phone vibrating on the nightstand. The screen was a chaotic explosion of notifications, mentions, direct messages, and missed calls. Her video had taken on a life of its own, and it now felt as if the entire world was watching. She unlocked her phone and her heart sank. The headlines splashed across every social media platform were not what she had intended. Daughter of MB legend Darius King shares harrowing tale of boutique discrimination. King's daughter calls out racial bias in high-end retail. The tone of the comments on her video had shifted. People were no longer just reacting to the incident. They were reacting to her identity. This was the exact outcome she had feared. The narrative was twisting away from the systemic issue and spiraling into a story about celebrity connection. She set the phone down, running a hand through her hair as frustration bubbled up inside her. This was never supposed to be about her father. It was supposed to be about confronting discrimination. A knock on the door pulled her from her spiraling thoughts. Kaylin opened it to find her father, a look of grim determination on his face. Despite the early hour, he was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his imposing figure filling the doorway. "Morning, kiddo," Darius said, stepping inside. He glanced at her phone, still buzzing on the counter. "I assume you've seen the headlines." Kaylin nodded, folding her arms across her chest. "This isn't how I wanted this to go, Dad. Now everyone's fixated on me being your daughter, not on the real problem." Darius placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me. You didn't choose to be my daughter, but you did choose to stand up for what's right. That is what people will remember. And if my name helps shine a brighter light on this injustice, then we'll use it. We can turn this to our advantage." Kaylin sighed, her frustration yielding to a renewed sense of purpose. He was right. If the spotlight was already on them, She might as well use it to amplify her message. "Okay," she said finally. "What's our next move?" Within hours, Darius had mobilized his entire network. His legal team was on standby, drafting official statements and preparing to escalate the matter if needed. Meanwhile, Kaylin worked with a publicist to arrange a press conference. She detested the idea of willingly stepping into the media circus, but if it was the price for holding people like Seraphina accountable, she would pay it. By midday, everything was in place. A podium was set up on the driveway of Darius's estate, surrounded by a neat phalanx of microphones. Reporters had gathered, their cameras trained on the family as they stepped forward. Kaylin stood beside her father, her heart hammering against her ribs as she faced the crowd. Darius spoke first, his deep voice instantly commanding the attention of everyone present. "Good afternoon. I am here today not as a basketball player, not as a public figure, but as a father. A father who had to watch his daughter endure something no person should ever have to go through." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. "This is not just about Kaylin. This is about the thousands, the millions of people who face discrimination every single day and do not have the platform to speak out. Today, we are demanding accountability, not just from one person or one store, but from an entire system that allows this behavior to fester." Kaylin then stepped up to the podium, her hands gripping the edges to steady herself. Her voice was shaky at first, but grew stronger with every word. "What happened to me was not an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern that tells people they do not belong, that they are not good enough because of how they look or where they come from. I am here today to say that enough is enough." Her words struck a chord, igniting a wave of applause from the onlookers. Reporters began shouting questions, but Darius raised a hand, signaling that the conference was over. The message had been sent, loud and clear. As the day progressed, the response was overwhelming. Major news networks carried the story, and public figures from all walks of life voiced their support. Celebrities began sharing their own experiences with discrimination, adding their voices to the rapidly growing movement. Meanwhile, the Elysian boutique found itself at the epicenter of a media firestorm. Former employees started coming forward anonymously, sharing their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of Seraphina Croft. One ex-employee detailed how Seraphina had routinely profiled customers based on their appearance, often refusing service to anyone she deemed unworthy of the store's luxurious image. The boutique's corporate office released a second, more detailed statement. They expressed deep regret over the incident, confirmed Seraphina's immediate suspension, and announced plans to overhaul their hiring practices and customer service protocols. But for Kaylin, it still wasn't enough. Apologies were only words. She wanted to see real, meaningful change. That evening, as Kaylin scrolled through the endless stream of messages on her phone, she came across something that made her stop cold. It was a private message from a young girl, no older than 15. It read, "Thank you for sharing your story. I went through something similar, and seeing you stand up for yourself makes me feel like I can too." Kaylin felt tears well up in the corners of her eyes. This was why she had done it. For every single person who had ever been made to feel small, to feel invisible. She screenshotted the message and sent it to her father with a simple caption. "This is what it's all about." Darius replied almost instantly, "Proud of you, kid. This is just the beginning." The next day, Kaylin sat for an exclusive interview with a prominent journalist. She recounted the incident in vivid detail, her voice steady and resolute. She spoke not only of her own experience, but also of the broader issue of systemic discrimination in retail environments. "What do you hope to achieve by speaking out?" the journalist asked, leaning forward intently. Kaylin didn't hesitate. "I want accountability. I want people to know that they do not have to accept this kind of treatment. And I want businesses to understand that they can no longer afford to ignore these issues. It's time for a change." The interview aired that evening, and the response was immediate. Social media erupted with hashtags like "Justice for Kaylin" and "End Discrimination Now." The movement had taken on a life of its own, and Kaylin was at its center. That night, as she sat on her bed, reviewing the day's events, she felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't anticipated. This was bigger than her now. This was a movement, and she was ready to see it through. Her phone buzzed with another message from her father. "Tomorrow we talk strategy. Time to turn this into something even bigger." Kaylin smiled, her determination renewed. This wasn't just about fighting back anymore. It was about ensuring that no one else would ever have to fight this battle alone. The next morning, Kaylin stood before the mirror in her room, gathering her strength for what lay ahead. Today, she and her father were returning to the boutique, not as slighted customers, but as agents of accountability. The events of the past week had snowballed into something far greater than she could have ever imagined. Yet as she prepared to face Seraphina Croft once more, she felt a potent mix of anger and resolve burning within her. Downstairs, Darius King was already waiting, his usual jovial air replaced by a grim focus. His presence was always commanding, but today he was more than just a towering icon. He was a father on a mission, and his intensity sharpened Kaylin's own resolve. "You ready for this?" Darius asked as she joined him in the living room. "As ready as I'll ever be," Kaylin replied, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "Remember, this isn't just about you," Darius said, his hand resting on her shoulder. "This is about setting a precedent. You've already accomplished something incredible by speaking out. Now, we make sure they understand this isn't simply going away." They left the house together, stepping into a sleek black SUV waiting in the driveway. During the drive to the boutique, Kaylin scrolled through her phone, watching the hashtags and messages of support that continued to flood social media. People were demanding action, not just against one manager, but against the entire culture that allowed such behavior to persist. When they arrived at Elysian, the scene outside was a stark contrast to the quiet luxury Kaylin had experienced on her first visit. A small crowd of reporters and onlookers had gathered, their cameras all trained on the entrance. Kaylin felt a sharp pang of anxiety but reminded herself of her purpose. Darius exited the car first, his immense frame immediately drawing all attention. Cameras flashed and voices called out his name, but he ignored them, extending a hand to help Kaylin onto the sidewalk. Together they walked into the boutique, the glass doors swinging open with a soft, familiar chime. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The staff looked up, their faces a mixture of apprehension and unease. Kaylin noted Seraphina Croft's absence from behind the counter, but before she could process it, a man in a tailored suit approached them. He introduced himself as the boutique's regional manager, his expression a carefully composed mask. "Mr. King, Miss King," the man began, his voice polite but strained. "We've been expecting you. Please, let's speak in my office." Darius's expression hardened. "We'll talk," he said, his voice low and commanding, "but I want Seraphina here. She is the one who needs to answer for her actions." The manager hesitated, glancing toward a side office. After a moment, he gave a slight nod and signaled for someone to fetch her. Minutes later, Seraphina Croft entered the room, her usual air of icy confidence visibly fractured. She was dressed impeccably, as always, but a nervous tension in her posture betrayed her fear. Her eyes flickered briefly toward Kaylin before settling on the manager, as if hoping to avoid the confrontation entirely. "Seraphina," the manager said, his tone firm, "these are the Kings. I believe you are already acquainted." Seraphina's jaw tightened as she forced a rigid smile. "Yes, of course." Kaylin stepped forward, her heart pounding, but her resolve absolute. "You know exactly why I am here," she said, her voice cutting through the tense silence like a shard of glass. "What you did to me was not just disrespectful. It was violent, discriminatory, and completely unacceptable." Seraphina opened her mouth to reply, but Darius raised a hand, silencing her. "You slapped my daughter," he said, his voice calm but heavy with restrained fury. "You humiliated her, and you thought you would get away with it. Well, you were wrong." Seraphina's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. "Look, I was just doing my job," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean what?" Kaylin interjected, her voice rising with indignation. "You didn't mean to insult me? To make assumptions about me based on my clothes? To physically assault me because you thought you could?" Seraphina's face flushed a deep red, and she looked desperately to the manager for support, but he remained silent, his expression unreadable. Darius stepped closer, towering over Seraphina. "Let me be perfectly clear," he said, his voice like rolling thunder. "This is not going away. You do not get to treat people like this and then hide behind pathetic excuses. My daughter is standing here today because she refuses to let this happen to anyone else, and I am standing with her." Seraphina's composure shattered completely. "I'm sorry," she blurted out, her voice cracking. "I wasn't thinking. Kaylin held up a hand, cutting her off. "It is far too late for apologies. What I want, what everyone watching this situation wants, is accountability. Not just from you, but from this entire company." The manager finally spoke, his tone conciliatory. "Miss King, I want to assure you that we are taking this matter with the utmost seriousness. Seraphina has been suspended indefinitely, and we are conducting a thorough review of our policies and training programs. We are also committed to implementing new measures to ensure that an incident like this can never happen again." Kaylin narrowed her eyes, scrutinizing his carefully chosen words. "Words are easy," she said. "Actions are what matter. If you are truly serious about change, you will make those measures public. You will show your customers and your employees that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated." The manager nodded, his expression sincere. "You have my word. We will make this right." Darius placed a hand on Kaylin's shoulder, signaling that it was time to leave. "We'll be watching," he said, his tone a clear warning. "If you do not follow through, you will be hearing from us again." As they walked out of the boutique, Kaylin felt a sense of closure, but also a lingering frustration. This confrontation was just one small step in a much larger battle. She knew there was still so much work to be done, but for now, she could take pride in having stood her ground. Outside, the crowd of reporters erupted with questions as they exited. Kaylin paused, turning to face them. "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice steady and clear. "This is about holding people accountable and making sure no one else has to go through what I did. And we are just getting started." As she and Darius walked back to the car, Kaylin felt a new sense of purpose settle over her. The fight was not over, but she was ready for whatever came next. The days following the confrontation at the boutique were a whirlwind. Kaylin found herself at the heart of a movement that had grown far beyond her personal experience. The viral video, combined with the press conference and her father's unwavering support, had ignited a global conversation about discrimination, privilege, and the silent struggles of those without a platform. Kaylin sat in her room scrolling through the endless flood of messages on her phone. Each notification carried a complex mix of emotions. There were messages of support from strangers, thanking her for her courage. There were painful stories from people who had endured similar injustices, each one a stark reminder of why she had spoken out. And then there were the trolls, angry, dismissive voices attempting to invalidate her experience. But Kaylin had grown up in the public eye. She knew how to navigate the negativity. What truly mattered was the overwhelming support and the opportunity to effect real change. Her phone buzzed with a call from her father. "Kaylin," Darius's deep voice rumbled, "we need to take this to the next level." "What do you mean?" Kaylin asked, leaning back against her bed. "You've started something much bigger than a viral video," Darius said. "People are listening. It's time to transform this momentum into tangible change. I have some people who want to help." The following day, Kaylin and Darius met with a group of civil rights activists, social justice advocates, and public relations experts at Darius's home. The room buzzed with energy as they brainstormed ways to amplify Kaylin's message and leverage her platform to bring about systemic reform. One of the activists, a wise, middle-aged woman named Isla Monroe, leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "Kaylin, your story is powerful because it's personal," she said. "But if we want to create lasting change, we need to connect it to a broader narrative. This isn't just about one boutique or one manager. It's about a culture of discrimination that permeates so many spaces." Kaylin nodded, absorbing Isla's words. "So, what do we do?" she asked. "We begin by gathering more stories," Isla replied. "When people see that this is not an isolated incident, they will be more likely to demand change. We can then use those stories to push for better policies, not just in retail, but in workplaces, schools, everywhere. Another activist, a young man named Liam, chimed in. We should also create a resource for people who face discrimination, legal aid, support groups, even just a safe place to share their experiences. You already have the world's attention. Now we need to build something that lasts. Darius spoke up, his voice steady and commanding. Whatever we do, it has to be big. People are watching. Let's give them something they can rally behind. Over the next few weeks, Kaylin immersed herself in the work. She and her team launched a campaign called Harder Rise Up Together, a platform designed to encourage people to share their experiences with discrimination and to offer resources for those seeking help. The stories poured in by the thousands, each one a testament to the pervasive nature of prejudice. Kaylin began to speak out more publicly, participating in interviews, panel discussions, and social media live streams. Each time she recounted her story, she felt a mix of vulnerability and empowerment. It was not easy to relive the incident, but she knew it was necessary. Her voice was reaching people, and that was what mattered. One particularly powerful moment came during a live-streamed conversation with a group of young women who had faced similar experiences. As they shared their stories, Kaylin listened intently, her heart aching for each of them. I know how hard it is to stand up, she said, her voice soft but firm. It's terrifying to feel like you're alone, like no one will believe you. But you are not alone. We are all in this together, and the more we speak out, the harder it becomes for people to ignore us. The live stream went viral, sparking another wave of support and media attention. But Kaylin wasn't interested in fame. She wanted results. One evening, as she sat at her desk reviewing plans for the campaign's next phase, her phone buzzed with a message from Isla. It contained a link to a news article about a high-end retailer that had announced sweeping policy changes in direct response to Kaylin's story. The company had committed to implementing mandatory diversity training, creating a more inclusive hiring process, and establishing a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Kaylin felt a surge of hope. This was what she had been fighting for, real, tangible change. She forwarded the article to her father with a simple message, "We're making progress." Darius replied almost immediately, "Proud of you, kid, but we're not done yet." As the weeks turned into months, Kaylin's campaign continued to grow. She partnered with legal aid organizations to offer free consultations for victims of discrimination. She worked with schools and community groups to promote education about bias and inclusion. And through it all, she kept telling her story, refusing to let the momentum fade. But it wasn't just about the big victories. Kaylin found herself deeply moved by the smaller moments, the private messages from people who said her story had inspired them to stand up for themselves, the parents who thanked her for being a role model for their children. These were the moments that reminded her why she had started this journey. One day, as Kaylin scrolled through the campaign's website, she came across a story from a young woman in a small town who had faced discrimination at her workplace. The woman wrote about how she had felt powerless until she saw Kaylin's video. Inspired, she had confronted her manager and filed a formal complaint, leading to changes in the company's policies. Kaylin felt tears prick her eyes as she read the story. This was what it was all about, empowering people to stand up for themselves and demand better. She screenshotted the story and sent it to Isla with a message. "This is why we keep going." Isla replied, "And this is just the beginning." Kaylin smiled, her resolve stronger than ever. She knew the fight was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Together they were making a difference, one voice, one story, one step at a time. The warm Viridia sun filtered through the trees as Kaylin and Darius stood before a vast open field in the heart of the city. Rows of white tents flanked either side, bustling with volunteers setting up racks of clothing, tables stacked with shoes, and boxes filled with accessories. The air vibrated with energy and anticipation. Today marked the culmination of everything they had been working toward, a large-scale community event to give back, amplify voices, and provide tangible support for those in need. Kaylin walked alongside her father, surveying the setup. She still found it hard to believe how far things had come since that fateful day in the boutique. What had begun as a deeply personal ordeal had blossomed into a movement of solidarity and action. And now, standing in the midst of it all, she felt a profound surge of pride, not for herself, but for the countless people who had rallied to the cause. "Looks good," Darius said, his deep voice carrying over the commotion. "This is what it's all about." Kaylin nodded, her lips curving into a small smile. "It's amazing. I just hope it makes a difference." "It already has," Darius replied, gesturing toward the growing line of attendees gathering at the entrance. Families, individuals, and children had begun to arrive, their faces a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "You've given people hope, Kaylin. That's bigger than any dress or any store." The event officially kicked off with a speech from Kaylin. Standing on a makeshift stage at the center of the field, she looked out at the crowd, a sea of diverse and vibrant faces, all united by a shared sense of purpose. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady and clear. "When this journey started, it was about a single moment of injustice. But what I've learned is that my story isn't unique. It's one of countless stories of people who have been judged, dismissed, or excluded simply because of who they are." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Today we are here to say that enough is enough. We are here to take action, not just with words, but with deeds. This isn't just about one person or one movement. It's about creating a world where everyone feels valued, respected, and seen." The crowd erupted into applause, and Kaylin stepped back, her chest swelling with a mixture of pride and humility. Darius joined her on stage, his towering presence commanding attention as he took the microphone. "This is about community," Darius said, his voice booming across the field. "It's about lifting each other up and making sure no one gets left behind. Kaylin taught me that even the smallest action can spark something big. So let's keep sparking. Let's keep pushing. And let's make sure this isn't just a moment. It's a movement." Throughout the day, the event hummed with activity. Volunteers handed out clothing, helping families find items that fit and suited their needs. A local catering company donated food, setting up a buffet where attendees could enjoy hot meals. Community organizations had booths offering services ranging from job training to mental health resources. Kaylin moved through the tents, interacting with attendees and listening to their stories. A woman approached her, holding the hand of her young daughter. "Thank you for doing this," the woman said, her voice thick with emotion. "We've been struggling, and it means so much to see people care." Kaylin smiled warmly, kneeling to speak to the little girl. "What's your name?" "Kayla," the girl said shyly. "Well, Kayla," Kaylin said, "I'm really glad you're here. You're going to look amazing in whatever you pick out today." The girl beamed, and her mother mouthed a silent "thank you" before moving on. Moments like these reminded Kaylin why this work was so important. It wasn't just about grand gestures. It was about the human connections that made change possible. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the event, Darius gathered the volunteers and attendees for a final moment of reflection. Standing in the center of the field, he held up a large whiteboard with bold black letters that read, "A world without prejudice starts with us." "This is our promise," he said, his voice steady and resolute, "to keep fighting, to keep building, and to keep believing in a better future. But we can't do it alone. It takes all of us." The crowd responded with a resounding cheer, and Kaylin felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She glanced at her father, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. Together they held the board high, a symbol of hope and determination. As the event wound down, Kaylin sat on the edge of the stage, watching families leave with bags of clothing and renewed spirits. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that they had made a tangible difference. Isla Monroe, one of the activists who had been instrumental in the campaign, joined her, a cup of coffee in hand. "You did good today," Isla said, her voice warm. "We all did," Kaylin replied. "But there's still so much more to do." "There always is," Isla said with a smile. "But you've shown people that change is possible." "That's a start," Kaylin nodded, gazing out at the field. The fight wasn't over. It never would be. But today they had taken a step forward, and that was enough for now. Later that night, as Kaylin and Darius returned home, they sat together in the living room, reflecting on the day. "You've made me proud, kiddo," Darius said, his voice soft. "Not just for what you've done, but for who you are." Kaylin leaned against his shoulder, her heart full. "Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you," he chuckled. "That's what family's for." As the house grew quiet, Kaylin felt a sense of peace settle over her. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been transformative. And while the road ahead was long, she knew she wasn't walking it alone. Together they had sparked something bigger than themselves, a movement that would continue to grow, driven by the voices and stories of countless others. And in that, Kaylin found hope for the future. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next one. Check out our other videos for more compelling tales, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Your support helps us keep telling these stories.